Welcome to Betrayal Trauma Recovery, BTR.org. I'm Anne. We've opened up some new group session times that work for Australians and also for women in the UK. Go to btr.org/group to see if the group sessions will work for you. I'm sure you remember what it was like when you were searching for help, maybe for your husband, hoping to find the right program or therapist. That's why I started podcasting, because I supported my husband through 7 years of pornography addiction recovery, and not one therapist during that time told me I was experiencing emotional and psychological abuse and sexual coercion. I didn't want any other woman on the planet to be in the dark. If you're like the majority of my listeners, you're experiencing the type of abuse that's invisible and difficult to wrap your head around. Your husband is lying to you, using porn or having affairs or some other type of emotional and psychological abuse, and you're getting the same bad advice about how to improve communication or your relationship. If you need support from women who totally understand, our coaches can help you sort through this. We'd love to see you in a group session today. If this podcast is helpful to you and you wish you'd found it sooner, one simple anonymous way to help spread the word is to click follow or subscribe on the Betrayal Trauma Recovery podcast. Every 5-star rating helps make this podcast more visible and will help save other women from getting the wrong kind of help, like a couple program that will make this type of abuse worse. Your support means I can continue sharing this life-changing information with women throughout the world for free. Scroll to the bottom of any page on btr.org and click on Support the Podcast. Thank you. I couldn't do this without you. A lot of women ask, what is the difference between psychological abuse and emotional abuse? So emotional abuse is when someone manipulates your emotions to exploit you. So they're going for that emotional reaction. Psychological abuse is the deliberate attempt to manipulate and control your sense of reality. Healing from psychological abuse versus emotional abuse is pretty much the same thing. You're still going to be healing from the lying and the deception, the gaslighting, and the manipulation. Psychological abuse and emotional abuse are linked. Both of them happen when your husband is having affairs or has a secret life, watching pornography, or having relationships outside the marriage. He's going to be psychologically and emotionally abusive. Grooming, blame shifting, that's all abuse. So on the podcast today, I have a member of our community. We're going to call her Margaret. Something happened to her track, and I tried to fix it, and it distorted it a bit. Her story is so good. If you're having a hard time hearing it, you can read it. Go to btr.org. Look up this episode. In the search bar, type in psychological abuse versus emotional abuse, and you'll find this episode. And if you're having a hard time hearing it, you can read it. So I want to welcome Margaret. Margaret, let's start at the beginning of your story.
In the beginning, I was young, got married at 23. So it was kind of a quick courtship, dating. I was very much involved in my church and met him at my work, clicked. And he started going to church with me, got baptized at my church. And then, one thing led to another. We're engaged and then we're getting married. And looking back, I can see red flags now because I'm much older and much wiser. But at the time, you don't think that they're red flags. You just think, oh, that's just a little thing. That's not a sign of a bigger thing. For example, this sounds so benign, but later it played out so much bigger in our marriage where we were sitting at a table and talking, and there was a newspaper nearby, and I'm talking, and he picks up the paper and opens it and starts reading, and the paper is now in front of me. And I remember thinking, I wasn't done talking, but he pretty much just cut me off, and I couldn't even tell you what I was talking about. But that lack of respect, I would say for years, you don't respect me. You don't hear me. I'm talking, but it's not processing with you, or you're not acknowledging me. I had dated a guy before him, and I still lived at home. We were coming home, and that other boyfriend was at the door of my house. And I told him, let's not stop. Let's just keep going. And as we drove off, a few minutes passed, and he just all of a sudden started banging on the steering wheel, upset with me. about that because I didn't want to stop, that I was ashamed of him or something. And it was very startling.
I wonder if he had hoped to just drop you off because he was maybe meeting up with another woman and he had plans or something like that. And when you didn't go in and he couldn't drop you off, he was ticked. But of course, he couldn't tell you the truth. And maybe he could emotionally batter you to the point where you're like, let's just go home then. And then he could go about his merry way and meet up with whoever he was going to meet up with.
He just got quiet and then was banging on the steering wheel and yelling at me.
Because nothing is what it seems with an abuser, it's very hard to figure out what's going on because you're trying to resolve an issue and they are trying to go meet up with their affair partner. They're lying to you about needing to work so that they can go use porn. And a lot of times you'll ask questions and they will literally never answer. They'll just be silent.
Like we would be having a discussion or a disagreement, an argument, and he would be quiet. And I'd be like, what do you think? Why aren't you saying anything? Oh, he'd tell me, I have a whole party going on in my head. I just didn't say it. But so then I'd be like, that doesn't help me and that doesn't help us. Looking back, I would tell people, like, trying to get anything resolved with him is so difficult because I could be talking about apples. We're going back and forth. And he's like, okay, we got the oranges all settled. And I'd be like, wait, what? What are we talking about?
That happened to me too. Part of that is that they're just getting energy from the argument. And so it's not about resolving anything. I'm a really good debater. So we would get to the point where it would be resolved. And then he would start up again on the exact opposite thing of what he just said. And I was like, what? You just argued for 2 hours for that? No, I didn't. It was insane. It was insane. I think they just gain so much energy from that chaos. It's fun for them. Right. They're having a good time.
Game.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because I would repeat back to him word for word what he said to me. Like, okay, so you're saying X, Y, Z. No, that's not what I said. I said, no, those are your exact words. But that's not what I mean. And I'd be able to say what you mean. And it would just go on like that. Like nothing ever felt like we accomplished anything. Or he'd be like, I'll try to do better. And I'm like, a lot of years of trying and there's no change. I thought we're just young and we have a lot of growing to do. And we've gotten married and the behaviors continue. I just thought it's immaturity. It's two people from two different backgrounds coming together, trying to make a marriage work. And my childhood was one that was my parents had a very unhealthy marriage. There was spousal abuse. So I knew what physical abuse looked like. I had seen or felt that. I felt threatened, had hands laid on me in that way. I would have known that. And I would be like, okay, I'm out. The psychological and emotional abuse, I could never put my finger on it. Just something's off. Something's not right. So maybe it's because I just don't know what a healthy marriage looks like. And his parents are married. He's an only child. His parents seem to have a good marriage, so they must have been good role models for him. So he must know. It must be me. And being in the church, got to pray more and learn how to communicate better and submit, respect your husband more, and things will turn around. Things will get better. I had first caught him using porn. I found out I was pregnant with my first son. I had gone to bed. He didn't come to bed. I'm like, where is he? And we were in a 3-bedroom house at the time. And I went to one of the bedrooms and it was locked. And I remember thinking, that's odd. Why is he locked in there? And when he opened the door, I could smell something. And I could see a diagonal view to the computer screen. It was porn. I was shocked. I was stunned. I felt sick to my stomach. I don't know what he told me. I think he said, I'll be coming to bed soon or something. And I just went to bed. The topic would come up off and on for years because I would catch him through the years. Back then, I didn't know, and I really didn't understand. And I grew up in that generation, 70s, 80s, where her friends' dads had the stacks hidden under the bed. Of magazines. And so I'm trying to process, okay, as a good Christian wife, as a woman, as a Christian family, I don't think this is okay, but like, how bad is this? And what do I do? And I did go to his mom and say, look, I think this is an issue, but what could she do? How could I fix this? I did tell him I didn't like this. This is wrong. I don't feel good about this. And I think he just got better at hiding it. But at one point, we did go to counseling at a church for marriage issues. And somehow, and he's very good at this, the focus became me. The person that was counseling us was not equipped for what was happening. They were not equipped for what was walking in their door. So he managed to get the focus on me, and the session became about me and my childhood and my issues. I just know that when it was over, I got in my car and I pulled off to the side of the road and I called my sister. Excuse me. Still triggers me. I was so upset. I was bawling. And I said, I can never do that again. I can never go back to counseling. It was so traumatic. I was like, I would never go back to another counselor.
Good for you.
It was horrible. So that was early in the marriage. That was probably 10, 15 years in. At this point, I was beginning to question his fidelity. I would find condoms, and he would say, oh, at the time we had grown sons, like 20, 19. And he would say, oh, I grabbed this from our sons, and they just ended up in my car. I know my sons, and I know they're not just leaving them lying out. So what was he doing? And that wasn't the first time I had found them in his car. I had found some early in our marriage, about 4, 5, 6 years in a briefcase he had left in the garage. He worked for business doctors, a very large group of doctors, and he was around a lot of people, a lot of women, hospitals, that sort of thing. And I remember finding a briefcase of his in the garage, and it had Viagra and condoms, and I was like, what is this? Because we weren't using those things. Oh, he said that the doctor, as a joke for his birthday, gave them to him. And as a young wife who just has a 1-year-old, I'm thinking, what would I think? I want to believe him. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And who am I going to go ask? The doctor? No. It was just little things like that I could never verify.
Blaming it on your kids, that is really, really wrong. Super wrong. And that they don't have any problem with false witness. And I want to use that word false witness purposefully. They don't have any problem bearing false witness, which is really alarming.
I think he knew I would not contact my son and ask him. I think he knew that. And so he knew that was a safe way to go. But that episode with finding the condoms in the car, that's after so many other issues. So, for example, the marriage was very difficult. We'd really been struggling. I found it out through my youngest son that he was tracking me through my phone because my son saw him watching the computer monitor and he could see where my car was going. And later when I got home, my son very naively said, hey, Mom, Dad knows where you go. And I remember being like, what are you talking about? And I don't remember the conversation with my ex. I don't remember. I just remember thinking, I have nothing to hide. I'm meeting my friend. I'm a mom to 4. I homeschool. I don't get out very often. Her and I would meet up every 3 or 4 months to just have dinner. So I have nothing to hide. So I don't know why you're doing that. So there's a long history of these things. Spyware on my phone, hidden cameras in our bedroom.
Hidden cameras in your bedroom. Do you know of sex trafficking, that he posted anything online?
I don't know that he did. He said that it wasn't a good camera.
So he would have sex trafficked you, but the footage wasn't good enough? Was his excuse?
He really would not speak. When I say he would just not speak, he wouldn't speak. He would just look at me. I would just back down. He had a heart issue. He almost died. Life flight and everything. And when he survived, because the odds were against him, I thought, this is our second chance. God, this is God's opportunity. We can turn this ship around because we've really been struggling. And he had a long recovery. Like, he didn't trust me. He was stalking me. He was accusing me of things. which I now know that was him projecting. He had been having affairs. He had been having a lot of affairs and a lot of things at work. So he almost dies. He's out of work until he goes back to work and they're telling him he's done. He always said it was because of this other minor issue at the job. He had been with them for 20 years. I don't believe that story anymore. I think he was having affairs at work, and I think it finally caught up with him. And so I still did not know that. I'm still believing what he tells me. And I'm like, hey, that's okay. We're going to be fine. God has brought us through this far, and we'll be okay. When my daughter was 17, and this friend of hers was on a dating app, my daughter comes to me at 10 o'clock at night with screenshots and says, Mom, my friend just sent me these, and it's my husband's face on a dating profile, and he has solicited pictures from my daughter's friend. And I don't think he realized it was my daughter's friend. And the friend saw his picture, screenshot them, and sent them to my daughter and said, hey, this guy is DMing me. Is this your dad? And she's like, Mom, do you think somebody took his picture and is using his pictures? And when I read the words for the little bio, the little hook to get people to click on you, I heard his voice in those words. Like I could totally hear. I said, baby girl, that's your dad. And it was about 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night. And I walk over to him and I'm like, you need to pack the bag and you need to leave. And when he saw what I was showing him with the screenshots, the look on his face, I knew that, yeah, he's done this. And he's like, but I don't want to leave. And I'm like, you don't have a choice or I'll call the police. You need to leave. I'm going to call your mother. I'm going to call your father. You need to leave. That was in November 11th. I'll never forget that. That night, he goes to her and he says, I have to leave because your mother's mad.
Yeah, duh, she's mad.
She was more on the ball than I was. I have to give her credit. She was much wiser at that point to what was going on than I was. She was very upset with me when I finally took him back 8 months later. It made her and I had a very difficult relationship. And I realize now that that was the trigger for her and I not getting along at that point because she saw what I couldn't see. And so he moved home. We're working on our marriage. We do affair recovery, which is based out of Austin, Texas. It's an emergency weekend.
For couples who have, someone's had an affair?
Yes.
Did they mention abuse at all?
No, never. It's always assumed, okay, yeah, at some point you're going to have sex.
You're going to have sex, which is coercion. That's coercion right there.
You're a good Christian wife and you need to submit.
Really don't know anything about rape, do they?
No, absolutely. I was like, okay, telling my kids, we've been married for 9 years. He says he still wants to be married. We can make this work. I'm thinking we're working on having a better marriage. It's still always difficult. There's just always issues. Sex was an issue because he moved home and wanted me to start having sex right away, and I didn't feel good about that. But I said, okay, and I can look back and see I really betrayed myself. Now, he had his own personal counselor. I had my own personal counselor, and then we have the marriage counselor. It felt like we could never get any resolution, like we could never get anywhere. And we started the counseling sessions, and then there's holidays, so there's these gaps in the counseling. And we're going in January, February, March, and we're going. But I remember him telling our counselor, what do I need to do? Just tell me so I can go get a checklist. At one point, he banged his hand on the couch and said, well, I didn't even do anything. I should have just done something good.
What? Wait, so he was like, wait, I didn't even do anything. I should have. Wow. Okay. He was lying in that moment anyway.
I tell you, when I look back and I say everything out loud, when I finally sat down with like my mother, I had never told my mother everything. Early in my marriage, my mother-in-law told me, don't talk bad about him to your family because then they won't like him. And thinking, well, yeah, I probably shouldn't. So I was very careful about what I told to who. I would never tell my best friend even everything, because if she knew everything, it probably would sound bad. And so I was very careful about what I shared. So I went to my mother-in-law and told her, and she said, don't be telling people. I seen a message on his phone before all of the dating app. I had seen a message on his phone about meeting someone at 10:30 at night after their daughter went to sleep. And when I confronted him, he said, oh, it was for a massage. A friend of his recommended her, and he wanted one late at night. So he told me he never went.
Yeah.
I believe that. And it wasn't until years later when we're trying to work through the marriage issues that came up again. And this time when he told the story, he did go. And I said, wait, you said you didn't go. He goes, no, I always told you I went up. I said, no, you didn't. I was a shell of myself by the time I left. Fast forward for a year, I felt like things were just not good. I felt like things were really off. And I went to him. I said, if you're not happy and you don't want to be married to me, that's okay. I understand. I love you enough to say, okay, we can separate and divorce. That's fine. And he said, no, I want to be married. In February, I had a gut feeling. And February 6th is when things finally came to a head. I knew he was cheating again. I saw things on his phone. He chased me around the house because I had the phone and he wanted it back. He was frantically trying to delete things off the phone while talking to me. He chased me outside as I tried to go through his truck, and I was thrown down a few times. Conveniently, the next day, he deleted all the Ring doorbell video, so I had no proof. And
So he knew what he was doing.
he knew he was caught. I had found condoms in the car again. So social media, I could not even tell you how I came across you in BTR. It started showing up, and I started coming across terms like Darvo and gaslighting and word salad. And I thought, this has been my marriage. This explains everything on BTR Instagram. Yeah.
Okay. So you're first introduced to these ideas that maybe it's abuse. Most women are shocked. Like, how did I not know? And then also totally not shocked at the same time. It's a relief because it's like, I knew something was wrong and this is it. Can you talk me through your thought process?
At first I was like, okay, I know what physical abuse is. Everybody has a clear understanding of that. So then when the whole concept of, no, this is abuse too, I had to keep listening and re-listening to podcasts and going, okay, him having affairs and then coming home and I'm not having informed consent to what's happening to my body and bringing home risks to my health because of his behavior. It was so painful to realize that we'd been married that long and the level of the manipulation. At the end, I would just sit and he would talk and I would just sit and nod my head. And okay.
At the same time, you've described some pretty violent episodes. And maybe it will help you, maybe not, to reframe it to think that that is the definition of survivor right there, abuse survivor, that you were surviving and you were resisting. And that was all you could do at that time because of how scary your situation was.
I think deep down at my core, I knew. I think that's why physically and intimately I couldn't respond anymore. There was a dread, and I slept on the edge of the bed with my back to him. And I would wake up in the morning in the same position wondering, how did I not fall off the bed? Because I think I knew I wasn't emotionally safe with him. He has punched holes in doors. He has yelled, not laid hands on me. But there's that fear, especially because I carried that fear and trauma from my childhood. So we want to avoid triggering any of that. So you be a good wife and you don't trigger that. And being the Christian woman I was, I wanted my marriage to work. And I've got 4 kids and I've been homeschooling them. And I always said that divorce would stop with me because my parents were divorced. I had other family members divorced and I didn't want that for my family. I wanted the marriage to work. And so he says he's sorry. He says he wants to be married. Okay. But when you're being manipulated and lied to, I forgive myself because I didn't know. I didn't know the extent. And what I was seeing, it's so hard. I was willing to believe him to make the marriage work.
It was the safest option at the time because women are really smart.
Yeah, I've got kids. I've been homeschooled. And how do I navigate going back to work? I've been dependent. I was the stay-home mom for 27 years. Finally, I texted a friend of mine, my good friend, for 20 years. Actually, I called her. I said, I'm pretty sure we're done. I can't do this anymore. And I told her what had happened. And she started asking her friends very covertly, very secretly, we need a lawyer. I need a lawyer for my friend. I had planned a trip that following weekend to go to El Paso to see my daughter. She had by this point got married and was living in El Paso. Flew out to see her, and that was a godsend to be away that first weekend, so I could process what was happening. And they got me a burner phone because I was very concerned that he was spying on my phone. And I found out months later, my son came to me and said, Mom, one day when I got in Dad's car, I heard your voice coming through the speakers. Dad did something real quick and shut it off. He was definitely reading my texts, my emails, listening to my phone calls. And so when you realize the level that he has been going through to keep track of you. And I told my friends, somebody asked me, are you afraid for your life? I said, I don't think so, but I need you to know that if, God forbid, I'm in an accident and I'm in the hospital, I do not want him to have power of attorney over me. I don't want him to have medical power over me. I'm letting everybody know. And I am not suicidal, and I would not run away because I have 4 kids, even though they're adult kids. I was like, I would never leave them. So I just needed people to know that, because at this point, you just don't know what they're capable of. And he knew he was going to take a loss financially because the state that I'm in, we get half. Although he cheated me out of half the home, which is another story. But yeah, he was not going to be happy about that. We went to mediation and signed paperwork, and then the final papers were January of this year. It was a heavy grief. It was really hard in the beginning to say the word abuse. I think because in society, we just think of physical abuse as that's abuse. If it's psychological or emotional or mental, like that's not really abuse, right? Because you're okay.
Do you feel okay?
I didn't. I wasn't. I still have to go back to my faith because as you know, there's the marriage advice books and Christian marriage advice books and reading all of those things. And I have good Christian friends who loved me, but who would tell me things like marriage is hard, divorce is hard, choose your heart. And that I hate. I'm like, good grief. If your marriage is that hard, choose divorce. That is not healthy. And then the whole God hates divorce sentiment, which we now know and is becoming more widely talked about, that's taken out of context. You know, that scripture is taken out of context and that's not accurate. And so now I have all those tools. Now I know, now knowing that this was not just a hard marriage, it was an abusive marriage where one person was a master manipulator, a pathological liar. I survived. And the last words I told him, he said, oh, you're always the victim. And I said, no, I'm an overcomer. I stand on that. I have been overcoming. I am overcoming. And yeah, it was abuse, and it was 31 years. And so that's going to take time. And I may always have those triggers. I since went back to that counselor because I wanted to let her know. And once she heard all the pieces, she goes, there was no way this was going to work. Because when she would talk to his counselor was saying a whole different story. He was telling the counselor different scenarios of what was going on. So my ex was going to his counselor in line. He would go to my mother-in-law and lie about me. He called my best friend and was trying to talk to her and tell her stories about me. He called my brother-in-law. He was setting me up. He went to our pastor. The pieces started unfolding. It was just so mind-blowing, so hard to believe that the person that is supposed to have my back and be doing life with me would go to this extent. He was out for himself and protecting his image. Everybody was shocked. And then they think, is it because he almost died? Maybe he's having this crisis. And I was like, no, this is going on for years. It just escalated.
It's interesting that it escalated after his near-death experience, because so many women, me included, are praying for something to wake him up, thinking maybe a car accident would help him understand. Like, my ex got hit by a car. I've actually never told that story, and I will soon on the podcast. He didn't die, but I did think surely this will help him understand. And even that didn't help. And I think one of the reasons is because they know. And they manipulate us to think that they don't really understand what they're doing, or maybe they need to be educated, or maybe communication will improve it, but they know what is going on and they've known it the whole time. And so to them, this is no wake-up call because knowing has never helped them decide to change because they've known every step of the way.
Right. I don't know if they just lied to themselves, if they're in denial. Even now, he has never had an open, honest conversation with any of my kids about the divorce and the lie behind it. Not once. One of my older sons went to him, and my son came back to me and said, Dad said he'd put a pin in it, and we'd get back to it, which never happened. My son tried to talk to my mother-in-law, and she was, no, you just don't understand. And he told my daughter in an email that he just has communication issues, and that was the root of everything. And if I had been as a wife, been a better listener, loved him, compassionate, it would have worked out. I don't know how they sleep at night. I don't know how they look at themselves in the mirror.
Yeah, I don't either. I think that all of that is just a lie too. And people, me included, have a really hard time being like, wow, they really do lie about everything. Because if they said the truth, I choose to do this, they've never wanted to say it in the past, why would they start now to tell the truth?
When it's been going on for so long, the lies now are, there's so many of them. Like I said, I caught him in that one lie. He couldn't even keep the facts straight anymore. There's just so much of it. I have such a deep desire to pay it forward for other women who may hear themselves in my story. And hopefully they're earlier on in their marriages and they don't stay quite as long. If you feel something's off, go with your gut. So many years I ignored my gut instincts and took him at his word. Go with your gut. If something feels off, it's probably off. And be there for other women. I now am in a full-time job, and there are 2 women where I work that I can encourage now because they're going through their own struggles and divorces and trauma from their own marriages. And I know God has put me where I'm supposed to be with these women. And that has been my prayer. If I can help just one woman out there, give her the courage to stand up and say, no, I'm done, and walk away. That makes me feel better, and I know it's worth something. It couldn't have all been for nothing. I wanted a happy home, but it wasn't for lack of trying. I know I did my best with what I was being told. I can hold my head up high. The marriage was killing me. I couldn't have stayed.
Thank you so much for being brave and sharing your story. It will help other women. Just hearing other women's stories, even without my enlightening commentary, if I can be sarcastic, is so helpful.
Yes.
Like when you hear someone else say it, it sounds awful because it is awful. Then realizing this is exactly what's happening to me and it's just as awful and I am just as important as the woman sharing this story.
Right. Because you feel like, good grief, it's embarrassing. But I really was in a fog. I really wanted to believe him. I really wanted the marriage to work. And I had 4 kids. Yeah. And being told as a Christian woman that if you pray enough, you submit enough, you be the good wife, you do all the things, they'll come around. It'll work.
Having been through it,
yeah,
there's no way to describe it to people who haven't, but there are good people who haven't been through it. They still probably can't quite understand it on the level that women who have been through it can, though, I think.
I agree. My mother, she had her own abusive situation, and I didn't appreciate that until now that I've gone through my own. I knew it was bad, and I would never say that it wasn't traumatic for her. But it's not until you go through your own trauma with a spouse that you go, oh, this is why she didn't want to be around him at the holidays. I was like, hey, this makes sense.
Yeah, everything becomes pretty clear.
Yeah. I have a deeper appreciation for women going through the divorce process and how difficult it is with the court systems and lawyers. That's a hard path to navigate. I attended BTR group sessions early on in the whole process and loved that I need community. I would go to BTR group sessions a couple of times a week, which was amazing. I tell people, you need to do this. If you can't afford anything else, you can afford this, especially with a marriage with betrayal. I know that from last year when I started my job to this year, my BTR coach, she's like, you're a different person. I was very beat down. And this year I carry myself a little better, a little stronger. I'm excited for the future. I know it's going to be good.
It will be. You're awesome.
Thank you.
If this podcast is helpful to you, please help us reach other women by following or subscribing and giving us a 5-star rating. Thank you for helping other women find us. If you've already purchased a copy of my book, Trauma Mama, Husband Drama, please circle back and give it a 5-star rating. A lot of women are searching for books about betrayal trauma on Amazon, and rating Trauma Mama will help them find this podcast, which is free to everyone. Your donations keep this podcast going. Go to our website, btr.org, scroll to the bottom, click on Support the BTR Podcast. And until next week, stay safe out there.